love-struck Romeo sing the streets a serenade, laying everybody low with a love song that he made. Find the streetlight, steps out of the shade, says something like, you and me, babe, how about it? Juliet says, hey, it's Romeo, he nearly gave me a heart attack. He's underneath the window, she's singing, hey, lie, my boyfriend's back. You shouldn't come around here singing up at people like that. Anyway, what you gonna do about it? Juliet, the dice was loaded from the start, and I bet, and you exploded into my heart, and I forget.
Let's get it set up here, we'll be with you
The movie song.
in a couple of minutes.
When you're gonna realize it was just that the time was wrong, Juliet. Come up on different streets, they both were streets of shame, both dirty, both mean. Yes, and the dream was just the same. And I dreamed your dream for you, and now your dream is real. How can you look at me as if I was just another one of your deals? When you can fall for chains of silver, you can fall for chains of gold, you can fall for pretty strangers and the promises they hold. You promised me everything, you promised me thick and thin, yeah. Now you just say, oh, Romeo, yeah. You know, I used to have a scene with him. Juliet, when we made love, you used to cry. You said, I love you like the stars above. I love you till I die. There's a place for us. You know the movie song. When you're gonna realize it was just that the time was wrong. Juliet.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Sunday evening radio show. Thank you for joining. I'm going to need some audience participation this evening because I'm not monitored, so I can't hear what's going out. So I'm DJing blind, so excuse me if the mixes aren't ideal, but at least we got a show. I believe you can hear me. Can I have a thumbs up if you can hear my voice? And an idea of whether the sound level sounds about right. Oh, welcome from New South Wales, Australia, Steph Wisdom. Is that your real name? How wonderful. All right, great. So you're with me. I've got to keep an eye on the actual dials and on the music. So it's going to be an interesting evening. So thank you. That's great. Sound test over. So yeah, as I said, maybe the mixes in and out, the fading in and out of the music's not going to be ideal, but we should be able to get through our show this evening, which is a second attempt at doing what we were hoping to do. I don't know, was it a couple of weeks ago now, wasn't it, when my system crashed the last time? So I don't know why I'm sitting here with headphones on, because I can't hear anything, so I shall take those off right away and focus on this extraordinarily complicated visual display in front of me and see if I can do this without audio. So yes, I don't know how many of you out there were on our Internal Alchemy weekend workshop yesterday, the last workshop of our 60-day challenge. So welcome if you were part of that. I'll talk a little bit about that later on this evening. But our theme for this evening's show is connection to the sacred. it's going to be the theme of our next retreat, which, gathering from feedback from the people who've been doing the internal alchemy program, is almost certainly going to be something of a direct follow-on, because it leads so nicely on from what we've been doing the last couple of months with our internal alchemy practice. So I'll talk a little bit later about the upcoming retreat, but our theme this evening, yes, connection to the sacred. What does it mean to us personally to have a connection to something that we consider to be sacred in our lives? Do you have a sense of the sacred? It is interesting, I found in recent years, how talking about things like the sacred, in inverted commas, it almost makes certain people slightly squeamish. It's something they don't really want to talk about. I do get a sense that I don't know whether it's a front we put on, but in mainstream there's almost like a sort of slight embarrassment about acknowledging the possibility that life might be sacred, or that there might be something sacred at work behind our lives. Which I guess is basically to say that we're trying to negate the idea that there is a spiritual aspect to life. You know, in our desperate efforts to quantify and qualify life at a material level and prove everything scientifically, we've squeezed out in so many ways the room in our psyche, in our group consciousness, if you like, the space that has throughout history been occupied by an ever-present, right the way through history across all cultures, a tendency to turn towards something which is hidden but sensed, known at a deeper level without being able to be concretely sure about it. Definitely involving a degree of faith, but something that we would perhaps call sacred. So I would like to talk about that tonight, and I'd like you to let me know what you think it is. What is sacred, and what is it, and what kind of connection do you have personally to your idea of what is sacred? And yeah, what does it mean to you? Very, very important subject, I think, at the moment, when we are facing so many questions about how we've been living our lives, how we're going to live our lives, how we have to live our lives right now in the middle of everything that's going on in the planet. Doesn't it seem an appropriate time to be readdressing our relationship to life and what we might consider to be sacred and most valuable within it? So, yes, a big topic. I've run retreats on the very topic. We've run retreats, the whole week-long retreat, where our entire meditation has been about developing a sense of devotion to the sacred. So I'm going to leave you to mull upon that. I'm going to start with a little sort of meditative journey for the first part of this show. That is basically that reflection on how we might connect to the sacred. So I know normally we start with a bit of music and we get into a meditative state a little bit later on, but I think since we do normally do our meditation at 7:30, let's do that now. Here's let's call it a meditative musical journey, investigating life as sacred. I wanted to say something about our connection to the sacred, because culturally we're quite, the essence of our spiritual culture is not very present. And, when you lose that sense of connection, it's very easy to fall into that way of being where what's life about but the pursuit of my desire. Almost to the point where we've try to prove to ourselves scientifically. We've almost made a very strong determination to prove that there isn't something more to life than meets the eye. Now, I think that's a great loss. And whether you can see it or not, you know, a little part of our heart dries out when we get told that this life is just a mechanical process within which consciousness arises as a byproduct. You know, this is a profoundly conscious universe within which this is just a display. And it's working at so many deep levels. You know, you can't explain things by cutting it apart, breaking it down and looking at what it appears to be made of. You can't. So our connection to the sacred is so important to us existentially. And I think one of the reasons that we are feeling such a sort of quiet state of despondency is because we're looking down the line and going, well, this pursuit of my desire, gosh, where do I go with that now? I don't think I'm going to be able to have these things I want. And we've also sort of tired of that pursuit. And arising within us, and so it should, is a deep sense of we need to show more guardianship to this planet that we are by far the most dominant species upon. And that's quite right. That's a sense of moral responsibility that is starting to awaken in us, and the way that we are sort of reaching out to, and asking for some more consideration and looking for ways that we could be more considerate. That is a very important development in our awareness and consciousness. That goes some of the way to instilling in us a sense that life is sacred. Yeah. But then, beyond that, you know, we can intellectually see, look, our impact is now detrimental and, you know, what we do has an effect upon others. But to get to that place where we see that the suffering of others is our suffering and that we are all profoundly connected to each other, that's the point at which we really take responsibility for ourselves and feel a sense of responsibility to others, not to sort of take away their suffering, but to make sure we're not a part of it. One of the things that meditation does is to help open up that way by which we do connect to that, what should we call it? Let's just call it the sacred nature of life, because the intellectual understanding that comes to us takes us so far, but what we feel within us when we start to connect more deeply is much more profound than anything we're capable of understanding in our minds. And that process of opening back up and reclaiming consciousness that happens when we meditate is a really, really important part of that. Because, you know, we smother our subtler and deeper impulses with the processes of our conceptual mind, to the point where we not only don't listen to them anymore, but stop being able to hear them. But your heart is always telling you what you should do and the direction you should be going. We know somewhere inside, and when we lose that connection, that's when we lose our way. It might be a while before your depth of perception opens you up to the subtle field that is the real architecture by which all of this is expressing. The creative process behind your lives is not apparent on first when we basically start to have a look at it. But it's through meditation, the process of, first of all, the heart starting to open, this mechanism of direct perception that allows the experience to touch us directly so that we are moved by it in the way that we ought and should and are meant to be moved by it. This is an extremely important first step. Thereafter, you've got to learn to guard that quality of your consciousness so that you can continue to be informed by it. Now that will take wise choices. We shut ourselves down to cope with what we do to ourselves. The impulse will be to allow yourself to shut down so that so it doesn't sting. Yeah? But the point is, if something stings, it's meant to, because it's telling you it's not good for you. That's your heart's way of telling you, this is not for my well-being. It is so simple. So when you lose that capacity to feel the experience that you're having, you lose that deep intelligence, or that capacity for that deep intelligence to inform you about the direction you should be going. This is not intuition. Intuition is a personal perspective. What feels right for me, for where I am right now, that's meaningful. But at a deeper level, by way of honoring what we are fundamentally and what this life is in essence, we need to learn to connect to that fundamental impulse that arises in us when we just meet the experience we're having. So this first stage of allowing your heart to open up again and feel, you now have to nurture it and honor it and give it the space that it needs. We're being asked to change, and because we're numb, we don't. Now you might feel it stinging enough to say, oof, I don't think I can do this anymore. Now that's when you change. When you reach a state of clarity and you look in upon the predicaments you face in your life, that's when the conclusions that you come to when your mind is clear and your heart is settled are the conclusions you should stand by. Don't go, okay, and then allow yourself to get smothered again and become numb, and then look again and go, you know what, I think it's all right. Because that's what tends to happen. So you've got to be brave and you've got to be courageous, you've got to be willing to change, and you've got to be willing to go against the flow. The inertia behind the momentum in which we're heading is so strong. It pulls very, very strong. It takes extraordinary tenacity and conviction to honor the direction in which your heart is pointing. And one of the greatest causes of the feeling of despondency and maybe even depression when it arises is the knowledge that I'm not moving in the direction that my heart is telling me to go. You could say that at an existential level there isn't any suffering greater than that, because somewhere in your heart you know where you want to go. And this is where establishing or re-establishing our connection to the sacred is so important. When you touch that stillness, and when that capacity to be touched by that stillness is intact, we start to develop a relationship with what lies in that stillness. And, I've suggested to you that at that moment you might start to recognize, to feel, be touched by this profound love that sits behind our lives. Now, it might be a while before you understand what that is, where's that coming from? And I don't really know whether I should even start to try and say anything about that. But being touched by it, and the longing to not lose that connection to it, is probably the strongest galvanizing influence you will feel to move in the right direction. It's like calling you home when you've been I don't know, wandering astray. So this is why we should honor it. When you feel touched, being touched by that is without doubt one of the most moving and profound experiences we have. Whenever it happens, in whatever way it happens, it impacts upon us profoundly. And we should let the impact that it has on us call out to us. So, while you're on the journey of developing the faculty by which you can enter really consciously into that, one of the ways to bridge the gap between your current state of consciousness where you feel moved and touched and open, but you can't clearly discern what this is through devotion. To develop a profound reverence for it and to investigate it with that attitude. And because that devotion to it puts it in a place of importance in your life. And, people have put their hands together and prayed without knowing what they're praying to since the beginning of time, because it's called to us. And we've got ourselves confused, we don't know what's going on. It takes a long time before we can see what's going on here. So there are two ways, you develop your own relationship to that. I think it's okay. Don't get carried away with too many ideas, don't build a big story up. Develop your relationship to the way that you are moved when you find that place of rest within you, because that's your connection to the divine. That is a genuine connection to what is, because that feeling that moves you is there within the experience that you're having. It's not something you created in your mind. Now, we've dreamed up all kinds of, belief systems and stories and all this kind of thing, and aligned ourselves around these. And that's one thing, but you don't know what it is. The one that touches your heart directly is what is. You know you didn't make that up in your mind. And though you don't understand it yet, or may not understand it, that's the one you should honor. When your path is driven by the longing to connect to that which you're touched by, that is actually very powerful and uplifting indeed. And you don't need very much to complete that journey. You don't. You don't see people like with extraordinary, complicated lives having made that connection, entered into it, and aligned themselves to that. You don't. Their needs are very few. Because it's really what you came here for. You came here so that you could understand what you are a part of. Because having come to that understanding, it will arise in you, that for which I came here to do, I've done. And you'll be at peace with yourself. And you'll tread lightly, and you'll delight in what you're doing, and you'll show reverence to life in a way that is important. At the end of your life, you'll just have, the only one thing you'll have to say is thank you. And when we reach that state, our presence here will not be a burden. It won't. All the effort that we think we have to make to try and adjust our lives so it comes back into a state of balance, so we live appropriately, it won't be an effort. It won't be an effort. that joyfully giving up the things that just burden you won't be a sacrifice. It'll be a relief. Being told you can't have the things you want anymore feels like an imposition. But reaching the point where you genuinely do not need that stuff, letting it go is a relief. I hear it time and time again, but how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we possibly reorganize our life like that? You let go first. And then it will be obvious to you. And it will be a relief to make those choices rather than a struggle. It's a simple thing. Sit quietly when you're touched by the stillness, rest in it, be moved by it, your heart will open. That feeling of longing that now becomes a sense of relief and ease turns into a feeling of gladness, joy, and then gratitude and love. And that's how you develop your relationship to what lies in the stillness. Until maybe one day you can see it for yourself. So I don't know, you can do it your own way. I think it's best I don't say more than that. You go and discover it for yourself. But the way to discover it is not through reading texts and deciding whether you subscribe to this system or that, or creating up some complex infrastructure in your own mind, but just keep listening to your heart. Because it's in your heart that you're connected to that already. Aren't you? All right, so let's just sit quietly and connect. So feel from your heart. Whatever challenges and difficulties and obstacles life has thrown your way, let go, so that you can return to that basic ground of your being and be touched by it. So feel from your heart. And making reflection on this rare, precious human life that you have, say to yourself inside 3 times. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Know that that love that you might be starting to recognize has never for one moment wavered. For all the muddle we've got into, for all the disregard we've shown, it's never wavered for one moment. It endlessly, boundlessly embraces everything. And out of that love, everything arises. That love that you feel inside you when you touch that stillness is the very same love that is everywhere. And when you feel it, you know you're at one with it. And your sense of isolation and separation is over. And you've completed your journey home. That's what you came here for. Nothing else. Nothing more than that. So just rest. Find that natural state of rest so that you recognize there isn't anything you need to add. Feel it, the power of it within you, when you just let it express itself through you. You only need to rest in it. There is nothing to add. So when you ask me the question about how do we get to a state of forgiveness or self-love or acceptance, self-acceptance, you recognize that your pain is only the pain of losing your connection to that. It is a great loss. And our pain and suffering is great on account of it. And it is only on account of that and the confusion that it creates within us that we do these things that we regret and don't do the things that we wish we should. There is no judgment. That love is unwavering. It's never not there, and it's never judged you for a moment. Why should you judge yourself? There's no time you've wasted or lost. There's only this moment, and it's complete within itself. And there's nothing to add. So go beyond merely accepting yourself and forgiving yourself. Love yourself profoundly, not your idea of yourself with all its vanity. Love the essence of what you are, which is the essence of every single one of us. So just let go. Trust it. Learn to rest in it. Rest your exhausted mind. So there we are, yes. Do you feel that? That life is sacred? And if it is, then how could we honor it as sacred? A little more than perhaps we do. I think, if we were to have a little look at what we might do to improve the state of our condition, shall we say. What is it that we as humans en masse have got so wrong that we would find ourselves in such a, shall we say, precarious situation? And I'm not talking about the virus, I'm talking about the sheer cost and complexity of keeping our human show on the road. How did it ever get to a place where it would cost so dearly just to be here? How did we get to a place where we thought that it was okay to take so much out just to justify our existence? I think if we strip it all back, whatever we might apportion it to, we might say it's greed, we might say it's a number of things, or blindness. But the thing that I feel, maybe not the most, but one of the most significant factors in the relentless willingness that we've shown to continue to pursue an untenable situation with regards to a sort of sustainable presence on this planet is the relentless willingness to push aside our instinctual sense that life is sacred and that we are accountable to life in the way in which we choose to live. I think if every single human being on this planet had a deeply instilled sense of gratitude, profound gratitude for just what life is, regardless of how it expresses itself, and that we honored it, every aspect of it, every way in which life expresses itself, if we saw all of it as sacred, then I think we would have chosen a different path. We simply would. And I think, it's interesting. We've done this 60-day program with a group of you, many of you out there this evening. But I've been teaching meditation for 20 years, and I've probably steered along that path at various stages, from the preliminary foothills of meditation right up to the high plains of deep, advanced meditation practice. Over 3,000 people now, probably, over the years. That's quite a number of people to watch walking along the path of, shall we call it, self-inquiry. And one of the things that I see emerging or igniting in almost everyone without fail, I would say it's very rare that it doesn't ignite in the heart of someone who starts to make a genuine spiritual inquiry into the nature of life. Alongside that, as soon as we start to pay a closer attention to what life is, to what our predicament is, to the way that life is actually functioning, the way that we become conditioned, what are the causes of suffering, as soon as we start to learn any kind of Dhamma, something that starts to emerge within us alongside that at a sort of unspoken, very personal level is a sense of connecting to something that we haven't fully understood yet, but we start to get a growing instinctual sense is there in our life. And that word, sacred, is probably the word that we would choose to use to define or to label that thing that is there, that we're starting to sense we're getting closer to, but we still don't know it yet. This is what is the sacred thing, the sacredness of life. And we can live most of our lives without really understanding what it is and still have a profound sense of devotion to it. At the end of the day, isn't that ultimately what faith is? Faith is to acknowledge that we don't necessarily know. We don't have the answers, but I live in faith that there is something at work behind our lives that is governing it, that is working intelligently upon it, that there is an intelligence, a simple, fundamental intelligence behind life that is at work within us and within all of us. And it's that growing sense I see emerging, even long before I start to discuss such things or teach a way of connecting to what might be sacred through our actual spiritual practice and through our meditation. It just emerges. It's emerged in the hearts of humans. Since the beginning of time, they've turned towards the heavens, or they've looked inside, they've turned to their dreams, they've tried to cast their field of perception beyond the veil of appearances to touch something that they know is intangible, and yet instinctively, right from the beginning of time, we've had a sense is there. Now, something that powerful and prevalent and predominant and so consistently arising in the psyche and the consciousness of humanity since the beginning of time and across cultures all over the world, something that deeply ingrained in us. How did we manage? How did we manage to factor it out entirely in our efforts to quantify and analyze and break down this life so that we think we understand it? And I think it is that. It is that single thing, that factoring out the sacred, what it means, what it might mean, what it means to us, how it is working, our connection to its intelligence, factoring that out of our vision of what life on the planet is probably the single biggest reason we got ourselves into the muddle that we're in. So what do you think about that? I'd love to know your thoughts. Please post your comments, feedback. Tell me what you think about what I'm talking about on Telegram or on the live chat, and your questions. And I don't know, I might be getting myself into deep water by asking you to ask questions about such things. But let's see. Let's see what comes up. Have a think about that. What does it mean to you? What do you consider to be sacred? And how could we, I suppose, establish a deeper connection to it in our lives?
Somebody said you got a new friend. But does she love you better than I can? And yeah, I know it's stupid, but I just gotta see it for myself. I'm in the corner watching you kiss her. Oh. And I'm right over here. Well, why can't you see me? Oh. And I'm giving it my all, but I'm not the guy you're taking home. Ooh, I keep dancing on my own. I just wanna dance all night. And I'm all messed up, I'm so out of line. Stilettos and broken bottles, I'm spinning around in circles. And I'm giving it my all, but I'm not the guy you're taking home. Ooh, I keep dancing on my own. still so near. The lights come on, the music dies, but you don't see me standing here. I just came to say goodbye. I'm in the corner watching you kiss her. Oh, and I'm giving it my all, but I'm not the guy you're taking home. Ooh, I keep dancing on my own in the night. Said I'm in the corner watching you kiss her. Oh no, and I'm right over here. Why can't you see me? Oh no, and I'm giving it my all, but I'm not the guy you're taking home. Ooh, I keep dancing on my own, so far away, but still so near. The lights come on, the music dies, but you don't see me standing here.
Yes, so I see your questions, I see your comments, I see, yes, your reflections upon how you connect to the sacred, what you consider sacred to be. I think for so many people, nature is the doorway into it, isn't it? To that sense of connection to something sacred. Why is it that nature has this profound effect upon us, or has this profound capacity to affect us so deeply? Have you actually thought about why nature has this effect or this capacity to make us feel connected? The reason that nature has this effect is because everything that is growing, that is living, that is coming into being all around us, everywhere, including us. But let's just take us out of the equation for a moment. Let's imagine that there were no human beings on the planet and there was nothing that we'd ever done, no trace of it was here. Now, how do you think life would be going? Wouldn't it be going absolutely extraordinarily well? Have you ever noticed how if you leave a piece of ground untended, things will come into being in it, things will grow, and eventually flowers will appear. Everywhere that something can grow, it grows, and it expresses itself in this unbelievably creative and imaginative way. Now, what's all that about? If the human being is the master of the planet, then what role has a human being played in all this extraordinarily beautiful creative display that nature is? The reason that nature has this profound effect upon us is because it is a pure expression of the sacred intelligence that is life. It's that simple. Life is an expression of a profound intelligence that is at work behind it. You know, nothing just happens to appear. Nothing just pops spontaneously into being. Everything is a reflection of this profound intelligence. And when we find ourselves in nature, we feel that it starts to work upon us. We instinctively, even though we don't understand it, we just know that there's something going on there, and we long to feel it and be a part of it. And when we shut ourselves away in our, our concrete jungle, when we shut away, just in our homes right now, if you look around at the space that you're in right now, I'm doing it. I'm looking at the computer in front of me and my, the table, and I've got my microphone and I've got my earphones and I've got a cup of tea, which is rather nice, and bits and bobs. And then I look around at the room, and everything that I'm in right now was built by a human being. And there is nothing in this room that I'm in that just came into being in accordance with that sacred intelligence. Everything I'm a part of, everything I got around me right now is an expression of willful stuff. Human creativity. which we have to admit is rather ingenious at times. But is there anything in your room that is as beautiful as what's growing outside effortlessly in your garden? Hmm? And not only that, let's just stop to have a think about this. While we're having a little look around our room at everything in it, then ask yourself how it got there, where it came from, and how we're going to put it back. We're not, are we? You take it out, you make this stuff, we make our stuff, and you can't put it back. Whereas nature, that creative process, everything it creates comes into being, expresses itself beautifully, and then passes away as if it had never been there. And there it is, it's gone. Leaves no trace, it took nothing out. It simply expressed itself in its essence, in its beauty, and then gone. And for billions and billions of years, it did it so perfectly. Every bird, every creature, every flower, every plant, every tree, everything in expression of that beautiful, profound intelligence. Even us. Until we became so clever that we felt we were intelligent enough to become the creator. Oh dear. Yes, Ruth. Humans fulfilling their potential as the creator. There you go. In a nutshell, the very reason we managed to undo this glorious planet that we are blessed enough to be a part of. So there you go. That's my initial take on it. For you to mull on, that life itself is sacred, and we're accountable to that sacred intelligence. And the further we separate ourselves from it, the more we impose our personal will upon that, the more conflict, the more friction, the more discordance. Yeah, the further out of coherence we become. And the cost of that is so great. And we are experiencing it now. So now is such an important time, isn't it? Surely, if we are going to reconnect to the sacred and put it at the forefront of our lives, this now is the time while you're sitting at home. These days and weeks locked down, if you're in a country where you have big restrictions upon you on account of the virus, and there we are going, well, we want our human world back with all the things that we had the freedom to do. Fair enough. But while we haven't got them, maybe in that quiet moment we can reconnect to the sacred. And then when we're reconnected to the sacred, perhaps we might ask ourselves, do I need all that stuff? All that stuff that the maintaining of did nothing but create a growing sense of separation from that sacred part of life that I was longing to connect to. Yes, so rolling back the sort of, I don't know, what should we call it? This mass of humanity and its ingenious creativity. Rolling it back enough. Maybe not all the way, I'm not suggesting that we do, but far enough that the creative intelligence, the sacred intelligence of life, can at least be the driving force behind life, instead of something that sits in the background, desperately trying, saying, come on guys, have a look. Do you think that perhaps you might do things a bit differently? Don't you think it's trying to say something like that to us? Anyway, I'm rambling, aren't I? Ranting on. I apologise. How about another beautiful piece of music? Isn't that a beautiful piece of music, huh? Well, I think so. So what have we got here? What are we saying? The spider making its web in the corner. Yes, how extraordinary. Isn't that amazing that a spider can just do that? The artificial flowers in my sitting room have suddenly become less appealing. Well, go and spoil yourself. Go and get some real ones. Yeah. We had centuries to realize that materialism doesn't bring lasting happiness. Indeed. So what is happiness? Well, I suppose if we answer all these questions this evening, you won't feel any need to come and join the retreat that we've got coming up. So before we go any further, let me give that a little plug. So yes, our connection to the sacred retreat is one that we normally do. I normally run once a year. It used to be one of the ones that we did out in the Pyrenees. We get everybody out into beautiful nature, out into the mountains, which is obviously a big part, plays a big part in helping us to connect to the sacred. But it was always my intention that the final one of this series of online retreats that I've been running during the COVID scenario, shall we call it, would be the connection to the sacred. And, it feels almost as if it is. It's like a return journey. We go out on this, shall we call it this exploration of consciousness, exploring who we are as human beings, whatever it is that we're looking for by way of personal resolution. When we first start out on the path, eventually there comes a point where we realize that the journey is a journey home. That our longing is to work out our way back to the very ground of our being. And hopefully, if we're successful in our practice, in our path, in our journey, we reach that point of coming home here in this life so that we can live that experience of awakening to what it is that we are and always have been a part of. When the Buddha talked about suffering, it's all too tempting to sort of just stop and go, well, attachment was the cause of suffering, aversion was the source of suffering, etc., etc. But when you look deeply into the Dhamma that he taught, what he was really saying is that it is the idea of myself that is the cause of my suffering. And why? Not just because of the muddle that this complex, entangled idea of myself creates in my life and how complicated and difficult it makes my life, but because the idea of myself is the one thing that's always in the way of me touching the ground of my being, which is sacred, which is already fully awake, that's not confused, never has been, and doesn't suffer in the slightest. The madness of it all, that we've built our world around this display of our individuality and our, ingeniousness. As a group of beings, as humanity, and as individuals. When the very nature of suffering is to put that idea of ourselves in the middle of our experience so that we lose our connection to the essence of what we are. How wrong could you get? You couldn't get more wrong than that, could you? I mean, really? It's almost like God is a divine comedian playing to an audience that's afraid to laugh. I mean, if you stood back and looked at what we've done and the muddle we've got into in this tangled knot of ourselves, you couldn't get it more wrong. And we're now trying to make driverless cars. Aren't we clever? Aren't we clever? I don't know. Do you think we're going to wake up? Do you think we're going to get it? Do you think we're going to take the sort of slap in the face with a wet fish and go, hold on, wait a minute? I think we might have got it a little wrong. So I don't know. I don't know where you're at personally. In this challenging time, this year, almost a year that we've been in this, we've had our inexorable pursuit of our desires absolutely checked, haven't we, by this virus? We've had to slow down, and we didn't like it in the slightest. And I completely acknowledge the huge amount of suffering it's creating. And the huge amount of suffering it's creating is a testimony to the fact that our life must surely be unsustainable. That it is taking such an extraordinary exertion of willful effort to keep our group display on the road. And now we can't exert our will over it. It grinds and it creaks to a halt so quickly. You know, it is such an important time to make really sweeping, deep, broad, challenging reflections about the way we've been living, and bravely say, you know what, there is another way. Now, when you feel afraid, if you look carefully at the nature of fear, that fear is the crippling feeling that I don't know if I can keep this personal perspective. It's this idea of hold this idea of myself together. You know, faith, there is, you know, the letting go that you're all trying to do, that's part of this process of freeing ourselves from suffering. No matter how much you get to a point of thinking we understand, ultimately letting go is an act of faith. You don't know where you're going to land when you jump until you jump. You don't know whether you're going to land on the far shore or land in the river and get carried away by the current. No matter how much you sort of think you've got your ducks in a row, there comes a point where you have to jump into the unknown. The moment you are born, you're jumping completely into the unknown. The moment you die, you are. Our life starts with the most profound leap of faith. Why don't we live our lives that way? Trusting that there is an intelligence in life. You know, I saw something extraordinary the other day, and anyone who's a mother or a father who's been present at the birth of their child will have seen this, but I hadn't. And I wasn't there live at the birth of a child, but I was getting photographs sent through as it happened. And I saw a photograph of a child that had literally just been born. The umbilical cord was still attached, and it was screaming in a state of despair. It was so clearly traumatized and alarmed. But what on earth is going on? You could just see it in its pink little face, screaming. And the next one, then the umbilical cord, all of these photographs coming through sort of, 2 a minute as it was happening. And the extraordinary thing that no more than 3 or 4, no more than 5 minutes after passing through into this life, that child was wrapped in a blanket, and I saw it asleep, and in the most profound, peaceful sleep, having been through the most traumatic experience you could possibly imagine. Imagine turning up here and you've never been. Those first moments when you've been slumbering so peacefully in the womb. That trauma, and yet something, as it drifted off into its first sleep as a human being, as it started its first day, its first hour, it dropped into a state of natural rest. And it was so beautifully peaceful. You could see it on its face 4 minutes after that extraordinarily traumatic experience. If it wasn't the case that there is a place of rest for us, do you think we'd ever recover from the trauma of even being born, let alone going through the life of a human being, growing up, getting our stuff together and keeping our show on the road? Do you think we would ever recover from that? The reason we recover from it day after day after day is because there is a place of rest that we go to at night when we sleep, where we're put back together again, where we're held, where we're nurtured, where we're renewed. Just in our act of sleeping. All it takes for us, and it's not we're doing it, for life to put us back together again is good enough sleep. Where's the will of man in that? Yeah? The moment we surrender our control, we fall asleep. How wonderful. It'd be nice if we surrendered our control and stayed awake. But in that moment, everything realigns itself to that natural state. And it's at peace. It's always at peace. It's never not been at peace. And in that moment, we are relieved of whatever are our woes. I think that's awesome. I think that's sacred, isn't it? Yes. All right. So what have we got here? By the time we meet... Your robots can do what we teach them, but they won't have an inner life. No, they won't. They won't have a soul, will they? No. And what are we going to do with ourselves when robots are doing everything anyway? And then what are we going to do when they all sort of break? Have any of you driven past one of these, derelict car yards? I was driving, where was it? I think it was through southern Spain. Not long ago, and I came up upon, there were fields and fields and fields of olive groves that went on for miles and miles and miles, and then suddenly there was this field, a vast field, and it was full of nothing but scrap cars, and it was like a cemetery for the things that we make when we can't use them anymore, and they're not going to crumble back into the earth. There were cars that looked like they'd been sitting there for 20 years, and they looked like cars that they'd just been pulled off a trailer that day. Thousands and thousands and thousands of big things that we made that aren't going to go away. It's like you create a scar in the fabric of that creative field every time you willfully create something that isn't an expression of the natural order. And there it is. It sits there. So what are we going to do with all these robots in our lives? Who's for artificial intelligence, eh? Go on, give us a thumbs up. All right. So, another little reflective journey. A little bit of... Do you like those sort of meditations where there's a bit of music and a little bit of Burgsy having a chat? A little bit of something to think about. Let's have one of those, shall we? All right. My role as a teacher is to give guidance on safe passage for those of you who wish to make your way home. We have to decide for ourselves in which direction we wish to walk. And it's a big decision. I can feel it. There will come a time when the Dharma will flourish in the hearts of humans, and virtue is the basis for the way in which we live our lives. And only in that time do we learn to free ourselves from suffering whilst living this extraordinary life, here in this desire realm. You may have a longing to tread upon this earth in a way that it can support you. and join those beings who have lived upon it throughout the ages and learned to live in accordance with the natural way of things. In which case you'll need little more than the knowledge of how to live simply and in nature. You'll still have to learn to temper your desires because they are great. If you have reached a place where you can delight in sensual pleasures, those sensual pleasures are hard to give up. But life is about choices. It always comes to the hands of a few beings who come to that point of consciousness where they are capable of seeing what they are doing, capable of understanding the natural laws, and so capable of bending them to their will. It's a choice we all have to make. We either surrender our personal will on account of our longing to live in accordance with the natural laws, or we continue to pursue our personal will to see what it is capable of creating. This Dharma is pointing at a natural order, a way that things actually are, the way that consciousness behaves, unfolds. Everything you look at around you in your life is a reflection of that same single natural order. There is not a hair out of place. We all need to understand that the only reason it comes to such misery is on account of living out of balance with those natural orders. So it's not for me to tell you what path you should be on. You have to find out for yourself where you came from and make a choice about which direction you wish to head. But this Dharma I'm teaching you is pointing it a way home, so you can continue on your journey to remember the conduct that you upheld to get to the place that you have been. Those places are not rooted in desire. They are not free of desire, but they are not driven by them. They are driven by virtue, kindness and love. And beyond that, a longing to know the source of that love. That's your deepest longing. And if it's not, then you have another journey to walk. So it's time to listen to your heart now, to not pretend that it's not calling to you, because we've had our time. Put it in your heart, let your heart listen to it, and ask yourself where you want to go, and reach a point where you understand how you actually get there. If you are a Christian, if you have a religious belief, then you should look deep into the very heart of what that is pointing at and ask yourself what it truly is to know God. Because if you really align yourself to your longing to know that, then you will find yourself letting go those desires that distract you. This is not a time for forgetfulness anymore. This is a time for remembrance. You will all understand what I just said in your own way. That's enough. You know what it is you have to let go in order to find your way. Be sure that you actually do it. This world has almost forgotten what is the very basis and ground for its being. Whatever you do, do not forget. If you have forgotten, do whatever you have to do to remember. Whether you call it God, or whatever you choose to call it, that divine intelligence behind your lives, make sure, if you long to know it, that you give it enough space in your life. If you long to be close to it, then make it close to you. Live close to it. Don't occasionally remember it. Live a life that is in accordance with that. Because that's your way home. When you rest in the stillness, when we tune in together to what lies in that stillness, when you open your heart to it, you're close to God. Listen to your heart in that moment, because it will show you your way home. So, are we feeling a little more connected to the sacred this evening? Created a little space, asked a few questions, reaffirm our commitment to bring that connection to the sacred to the forefront of our lives. If anything we should be doing now, that's what we should be doing. You know, every day I wake up now, I say thank you. Just to be alive, to be warm, to have slept in a comfortable bed and to know that I can eat today. You know, I really realize, I've been teaching it to everybody, I've been saying to everybody for years till I'm blue in the face. Food, shelter, companionship, it's all you need. Everything else is a gift, is a bonus. But now I realize how profoundly grateful I am just for that, and that if I didn't have more, I would still feel profoundly grateful. I think gratitude is such an important part of our connection. It's being in touch with the things that actually matter and feeling a gratitude that values them. You know, it starts to open us up. You know, there's a question here. It said, as we surrender our virtue to our desires. Okay, it says, you, as in Burgs, you said, as we surrender our virtue to our desires, we lose our connection to the sacred. How does that happen? How does it happen? There it is. That's how it happens. As we surrender our virtue to the pursuit of our desire. That's basically the great unfolding, undoing, unraveling of that equilibrium, as Anne's put it. The balance that is life. You know, when you want something badly enough that you would harm yourself or others in the pursuit of it, you create a rupture in that divine intelligence, in that sacred equilibrium, by willfully taking something just because you wanted it. And in that moment, we surrender that part of us that is, sacred, divine, virtuous, innately virtuous. We blind ourselves to that loving intelligence that is the real driving force of our lives because we want something badly enough. And in the pursuit of that thing I want, I can't live comfortably with that desire alongside this deep instinctual knowing what's right and wrong. So I'll surrender that. I'll pretend I don't know that it's not quite right, that I shouldn't really be doing it because I want it so much. You know, it's that moment that, you know, we take the apple from the tree of life when we were already living in paradise. It's that, isn't it? And so we surrender our virtue. Because if life, so this nature that's growing around us, expressing itself in this sacred way, this sacred intelligence. Well, what do you think that sacred intelligence is? What do you think it is? I mean, what do you feel when you truly connect to it? What do you feel? What's the next thing that arises in your own heart when you are stopped in your tracks? Or when you touch that still point inside you? It's love. It's love. It's only love. It's what love does. It expresses itself beautifully, taintlessly, harmlessly, without creating suffering. Love does that. God does that, if you want to call it that. And we don't, because we want what we want more badly than we want to maintain our connection to that love. So this return journey that brings us back to our heart is that way back to that sacred, loving intelligence, that ground of unfathomable love that has held you every night in your sleep since you were a terrified little child, waiting for you just to let go the grip of your mind enough that you could actually fall asleep so it can do its magical work upon you and weave your extraordinary life along. It's love, my friends. It's love that we feel disconnected from when we get lost in the maelstrom of our mind. When we look at the world and we ask ourselves, how are we going to fix this mess? How are we going to willfully put back together again what we willfully created and got broken? It's not meant to be fixed. You know, nature has its way. Love has its way. The world wouldn't be like this but for the will of man. And all that suffering that we see out there, it wouldn't be there like that. But it is. And we've just got to love it to death as it is. And find, each one of us, our way back to that love that we've somehow, at some level, each of us is suffering the pain of feeling separated from that love. Until those rare moments, and hopefully as we progress, less and less rare moments, when we start to feel it coursing through us again. How many of you, whilst practicing the mechanics of internal alchemy, found yourself reconnecting or connecting to something that was moving you, that was profound, that was intelligent, that felt loving, that felt nurturing, that wasn't just you standing with your arms in the air or holding your breath for 2 minutes or whatever? How many of you found that your practice brought you a little closer to that over the last 2 months? So, since we're in this situation, let's make the most of it. Let's make the most of this difficult situation. I've always said that if we can see our challenges as our invitation to evolve, we come through our hardships better people. A lot of people are suffering now. Let at least their suffering be something that galvanizes us to realize that things have got to change and then go and make those changes. I know that those extraordinary machines that are keeping people alive were built by humans, pumping oxygen to keep those lungs going. But the state that we are in is a testimony to the fact that we've allowed ourselves to live in a completely unbalanced way. Nature would not have supported 7 billion of us here. The planet can't do it. Not without us bending it, every bit of the planet to our will. So it isn't surprising that there's a lot of suffering, because we've bent things so much to our will to squeeze ourselves all in here. Nature doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. You know, a colony of ants that becomes overcrowded, it becomes chaotic, it breaks down, they either die or they break apart and they go and do it somewhere else. Everything grows. When anything grows too abundantly, it gets checked. Cancer is uncontrolled growth. That's all it is. It's life out disconnected from the sacred intelligence behind it that causes it to behave in an erratic, uncontrolled, volatile, unstable way. Nature doesn't do that. You see a handful of sicknesses in nature, a handful of them. And humanity is riddled with it. That is an expression of how disconnected we are from that sacred intelligence. So let's at least stop now and make the reflection, how can I reconnect in this difficult moment, in this quiet time when I've had so many of the noisy things that I filled my life with, when I can't have them, how can I stop and quietly reconnect to that intelligence that I long to feel in my life? That intelligence that puts me together again in my sleep. Why is it that every day I have to get up again and make a muddle? What if I didn't? What if when waking up in the morning fully rested, I didn't make a muddle? I didn't take out more than I was going to put back that day. Then I would be living by the same sacred intelligence that everything else has to live by. Nothing else has the choice. It has to live. It depends utterly upon that sacred intelligence. So, why shouldn't we? Yes, have a little out breath, have a little sigh. It's just there in the background, my friends, that love. Go on quietly, just sit quietly. I'll stop for a moment. I won't even say anything. I won't even put any music on. Just sit quietly in your room, in your chair, wherever you are. And see if you can't feel it, that you're touched from all directions by something. Behind, even if you're in the middle of a city, with all the madness of humanity going around, all of that is going on over and above something that rests in the background that is always there. Just stop for a moment and be touched by it. Just rest. Rest your exhausted mind. Let your heart open. There's nothing to add, but thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace
All right, my friends. So, yes, I don't know, that feels like rather a nice place to wrap things up, don't you? Thank you for joining this evening. Little thing I'm going to share. Somebody made a beautiful little video. They took a discourse from the long retreat that we were at just before we came into this lockdown, our last retreat. It's a discourse that I gave on that retreat. Ashen, one of the students on that retreat, made this beautiful video. So I thought I'd share that with you this evening. It feels like a nice way of rounding it down. So I'm pasting the link now in live chat if you fancy, as we sign off, having a little look. If not, just relax. Enjoy your evening. I'm looking at dates for this Connecting to Sacred meditation retreat online. Today being the 17th. And I'm thinking, if it's not too soon, that the 30th and the 31st of January should be the weekend that we do that. So I will put a mail out, but just to give you a heads up, if you feel like doing a weekend retreat from lockdown, I just feel it would be better to do it from within lockdown than when lockdown might end. And so I think to do it sooner rather than later, because I've got a feeling that the focus, the concentration, to do something like these online retreats is so helped. If anything's, if this lockdown has done anything, it's helped us to meditate. So there you go. Those are the dates. The 30th and the 31st. We'll start the Friday evening, the 29th, and we'll finish the Sunday evening of the 31st. I'll type that in live chat now. All right, beautiful people. Thank you for joining. Keep your meditation going. Don't forget to join our loving kindness sessions, 7:15 every evening. For those people who are struggling now, it's very important that they feel our support. Let us know, anyone you know who's finding life difficult, and we'll do our best for them. And I'll try and get on. Now I've recovered from the lurgy. I'm just going to call it the lurgy because I don't know what it was. But now I've recovered from my lurgy, I should be able to get online. We should be able to do some live loving kindness meditations. But if I'm not there, I'm there with you in spirit, meditating with you. And anyway, you're big and grown up now. You can meditate on your own, can't you? All right then, have a lovely evening. Enjoy the video. I'll just put a little bit of music to play out with, and I'll see you next time. Sometime soon, I'm sure. Have a lovely evening.
precious steel I won, drying in the color of the evening sun. Tomorrow's rain will wash the stains away. Something in our minds will always stay. Perhaps this final act was meant to clinch a lifetime's argument. But nothing comes from violence, and nothing ever could. For all us born beneath an angry star, lest we forget how fragile we are. On and on the rain will fall, like tears from a star, like tears from a star. On and on the rain will say how fragile we are, how fragile we are. On and on the rain will fall, like tears from a star, like tears from a star. On and on the rain will say how fragile we are, how fragile we are, how fragile we are, how fragile we are.
Long as I remember, rain been coming down, clouds of mystery pouring, confusion on the ground. Could be through the ages, trying to find the sun, and I wonder, still I wonder, who'll stop the rain. I went down Virginia, seeking shelter from the storm. Caught up in the fable, I watched the tower grow. 5-year plans, a new deal, wrapped in golden chains. And I wonder, still I wonder, who'll stop the rain. Heard the sing